Hi. It's so nice to see everyone again virtually. You're on season 3 of Music and Chat with Shirley Ong, and it's a good morning from me to you in sunny Singapore. Please say hi in the live chat right there and let us know where you're tuning in from. Don't be backward and coming forward. And remember, if you have any questions, to put them in the same live chat, and I shall attend to them as the stream moves along. Please subscribe to support my work. Thank you. I want to say hi to Gary Mayulo, our ambassador for music and chat. Hey Gary, thanks again for making sure that everything works fine from your side. Everyone out there tuning in, you know there is a 30 to 90 second lag from where I am streaming to when you receive the signal. So hurry up with your greetings and your questions in the live chat. So by the time we get them, we are still live streaming. I want to say also to Brian. Hi, Brian. Hey, good to see you as well this morning. So how you all doing, by the way? Good, I hope. Local news from SG, Singapore. With the rising COVID numbers, work from home has become the default, and social groups social group size is now down to 2 once again for a month starting Monday. Everyone stay safe and keep happy. I began streaming May of last year, if you recall. So it's been about a year and a half already. And as a means to stay in touch with all of you, I couldn't track back to Nashville, and I couldn't do my annual gig circuit. So I thought this was a good way to stay in touch with you all. And thanks to all of you, we have gotten together virtually for 43 episodes already. I want to thank you all for making music and chat the hearty party that it has become. We're an international conference of cool folk, y'all. Which reminds me, let me know where you're tuning in from when you get here. Thank you. So it's 9:37 a.m. in Singapore. Let's get on with the stream. I want to perform for you like I usually do. I'm leaving you a message. It's the first single that I wrote and released in Nashville. It's a song, because I was inspired by the Nashville songwriting spirit to try my hand at spinning a different yarn. Of course, there's always the Shelley-ism in my work, so I couldn't get too far away from my sound, but I wanted to write a good story. So this is a story about someone who can't get rid of their cell phone. They're constantly on it, and the rest of the world is oblivious to them. It's called I'm Leaving You a Message. It's from my 4th album, and you can buy it on my Bandcamp store. So let's turn my theremin and synth cam on, and let me move this microphone. Interference, sit next to you while you stare at your hand. I try to talk to you, but I'm not getting anywhere. Something or somebody's always caught in my way. I'm leaving you a message. See you one fine day. Interference, you are a bad connection, like a droplet in a waterfall, drowning my voice in your noise. I try to make polite our conversation about what you're doing and the music that you play. But when the phone rings, you are lost in your own world. I'm leaving you a message. See you one fine day. Whenever I'm with you, you stare at your phone, or someone's on their way. You've got to get home, but whenever I call, I have to read my number at the tone. You tell me that your world revolves around me, but whenever I call, you're not on the line for me, I see. So that was I'm Leaving You a Message from my 4th album, y'all. Oh, dear me, dear me. I want to say also hi to my dear friend Mike Brunt. Oh, thank you so much. That's one of my favorite songs too. And strangely enough, it's been several years since I released it, and it's still so topical, isn't it? People staring at their phones instead of getting together with loved ones and chatting. Although COVID has very much brought that back to our consciousness. Stay together and be good to one another and get off those phones already. Also want to say hi and good morning to our dear friend from Sydney, Australia, Sam. Good to see you, Sam. So let's get on with the live stream at hand. I'm really excited to introduce to you my friend, Canadian Eric de Fontenay, who is the founder and president of MusicDish China, a music agency based in Beijing, focused on producing and promoting live music events across China. He is probably better recognized pre-MusicDish as the founder of MI2N, an online trade magazine and music news service. All right, everyone, let's welcome in Eric de Fontenay. And as usual, we shall chime him in via Skype. Hey, Eric.
Ni hao, hello.
Ni hao, good morning, 早安.
Good morning.
And 早安 and good morning to everyone out there as well tuning in. I just want to remind you before we hit Eric with our list of questions and queries, please let us know where you're tuning in from in the live chat. I see several of you already well-behaved regular viewers who have done that, my good friends. Some of you, I can see from my statistics on my iPad here that there's several of you who are too shy. So come on now and let us know where you are tuning in from, where you are based now in the live chat, please. Our hearty party depends on you making yourself known. This is no masquerade party. Unmask yourself, please, in terms of your identity. Nothing
Not
to do.
in terms of not wearing a mask.
Yeah, I know. I know it's. You guys know I'm not politically inclined or motivated in any way, so don't take it the wrong way. I'm just gonna turn up Eric's volume here a bit so I can hear him more clearly. All right, you guys. Eric, so good to see you again. We had a quick chat earlier on, but it's always good to see an old friend. And I hear you've done quite interesting things over in China, so that's why you're on the live stream. But I've known you since your days working on MI2N. Of course, I'm curious to know how the idea for MI2N first came about.
Well, that goes back many, many years. So it actually goes back to the kind of the dawn of music and the internet. So I launched MusicDish, the company, in 1997. So it was a few years after the web and the browser came out. Before you had these walled gardens, AOL and Prodigy kind of services, and then came the World Wide Web. And I was actually beforehand working in telecom. And so I was very familiar with a French pre-version of the internet, which was called the Minitel. And so when I saw the web, I was like, oh my God, this is going to totally change everything. And so I launched MusicDish and thought that music was actually going to be the watershed. That was my bet, that music would be the watershed for the internet because it was one of the most accessible while being engaging cultural media, right? Coinciding with that was the MP3 format. So people have to realize we didn't have Wi-Fi. We had what was called dial-up, 14.4 kilobits per second. I know it sounds so ancient. Just think the Flintstones. And so things like movies and video were really not practical on the internet. But because of the MP3 format and its compression, music was. And so when I launched MusicDish, it was actually the same year that CD Baby and MP3.com would launch, which are two companies that kind of shaped the digital music landscape that would come before Napster, before MySpace, and et cetera. And MI2N specifically, you know, in the old days, what I felt was like musicians and artists were reading maybe Spin and getting one set of information and news, while music people in the music business were getting another set of information. And of course, it was all highly, shall we say, curated. I mean, it was the old publishing industry, right? Very different than what we have today with YouTubers and blogging and etc. So the idea was to create a platform which would allow everybody, whether you were a musician, whether you were a label owner, a manager, it didn't matter, you could basically submit news to the platform. And it would be a platform that very much would try to engage across all the music industry. The idea is we should all be reading the same thing. Music industry people should be aware of the technological advances, how it's impacting the business, copyright, and etc. And people in the music industry should be aware of trends that are happening in the music scene, because of course the internet would unleash a lot of trends. And so that was the idea of MI2N, and it ran for up until last year. I finally retired it because I thought it was, it had had a good run, but the internet is very different today than it was in 1997. Actually, it launched in 1998, the platform itself.
So you happy with the run that you had with it? You happy
Yeah,
with the goals that you attained? And
sure.
you had a lot of loyal supporters, because I was one of them.
It was at its time the biggest online music newswire. So think something like AP News or something like that. So that's the concept. It was a newswire, right? It wasn't
Mm.
edited. It wasn't us writing articles. That was another website. It was basically, yeah, like a newswire. And it was the largest music industry newswire on the internet for well over a decade.
I suppose you didn't get an award for working so hard at something. I can't think of the word right now.
Yeah,
So
but I got a lot of satisfaction, talking to artists and promoters and labels who would tell me how essential the
mhm,
service was, and leads, deals that they got because they were able
mm,
to reach people that they wouldn't
mm.
otherwise know how to reach. So that was, I mean, that's awards. Awards are not, you know,
I know, I
uh,
hear you. But you deserve one, so here you are. Here's a
a
virtual
digital, visible
pretend one.
one.
So it seems in 2010 then you founded MusicDish China to focus your interests in the Chinese market, and as you said, you subsequently trimmed MI2N from your line of sight. It's no more. You didn't consider handing it over to someone else. You just thought, well, that's it. Goodbye. I had a great run with you, and now it's MusicDish
Well,
China.
I think the market the technology and the market had really changed.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, and that's characteristic of the internet. It's always
Yeah.
evolving. It's always changing.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, it ran for 20 years. I think, at that period, which was the kind of the beginning and initial growth
Mm-hmm.
of, we'll call it the digital music sector, it
Mm-hmm.
really had a place. But I think today is a very different world. And kind of, there's only so many things I can juggle.
Yeah.
So really, I was focused on the Chinese and kind of broader Asian market.
Mm.
So no, I just decided that had had its run. I'd never really thought of selling it or passing it on. I just thought it had had its run. It's good.
Mm.
Now kill it.
Got it. The off switch. Cling. So
Yeah.
when was the inclination towards the Chinese market? When did it kind of make itself obvious to you? Did you happen to read something, someone you talked to, or you just had an interest? It just came out of nowhere. You woke up one morning and ding.
No. Well, I mean, China. I mean, Music Dish. So we would one of the things that Music Dish did was that we were a media partner for a lot of the major music conferences, right? So like MIDEM, CMJ back in the day, Canadian Music Week, conferences like that. So actually, MIDEM, we were a media partner for over a decade. And so I would always go to like the different country booths that you had at MIDEM, and trying to find out what was happening in how the market was different in different countries and et cetera. And I go to the Chinese one, and there'd be maybe, if you were lucky, one person that was there couldn't really speak English and didn't really have anything to present, or what they were presenting. I mean, I couldn't believe that that was reflective of what was happening in China.
Yeah.
Most of the other people were out, because it was MIDEM is in Cannes, so they were out shopping at Chanel, and this was their excuse to do, yes, shopping. But in 2000, so there's a music conference called Music Matters, which now is actually held in Singapore, but at the time started in Hong Kong. And so Jasper Donnet reached out to me to be a media partner for Music Matters in Hong Kong. Mm-hmm. And I think he reached out to me at first in 2008. I was like, didn't really have an interest. And by 2009, I was like, why not? I really, this will be an opportunity, because there weren't really a lot of music conferences in Asia, mm-hmm. frankly. So this would be an opportunity to get to know better the Asian market. And I've always wanted to go to Beijing. I've always been kind of a Sinophile since I was really young. So it was an opportunity for me to see China. So after Music Matters, I went to Beijing. I went there for 10 days. So not a short trip. Mm-hmm. And I went with a mission, kind of funny. I had a question: is there underground culture in the belly of the beast? Mm-hmm. This is the seat of the government. This is, this is where, so much of history has happened in China, but political history and et cetera. Is there underground culture? I imagine there wasn't, but I went with a mission to try to find it. Coming from New York, I'm a big lover of underground cultural phases, trends, and et cetera. And I was really, from art to music. Of course, my focus was music, but I was also looking at art and et cetera. So there was Shijoba 798, the art district, which I was just like blown away by. Especially, I was seeing a lot of post-cultural revolution art that was happening, and then the phase after. And in music, I went to places like Yugong D22, which is a lot of people compare it to the CBGBs of Beijing, and White Rabbit, which was an underground electronic club that us old veterans still talk about, and just like totally blown away, because it kind of reminded me of New York in the 80s, 90s, 80s to mid 90s. Which was a really interesting. I mean, this is when you have punk in New York, you have, hip hop that's, developing and et cetera. Very underground culture and art, and it kind of reminded me of that, kind of raw culture, almost underproduced, because it was more about creativity and innovation than producing a polished product. And that just like appealed to me. And, right after that trip, I contacted some people that I met, because I kind of met a lot of different people in this scene. And, I was asking them, like, how can I find out about indie music culture? And they're like, well, there's this website called Douban that you can go to, and all the bands have, a profile. It was kind of like the MySpace. It's still around, actually.
Wow.
It was kind of like the MySpace of China. Though MySpace was available in China at the time too.
Oh, okay.
And so I just spent like the whole time, like months and months, listening only to music, indie music, on Douban, and really getting myself, acquainted with the different bands, styles, music, and etc. And 9 months after the trip, is when I launched MusicDish China, the brand, with a website and a podcast at Midem.
Wow. That is very interesting. Such an adventure. I'm still processing the whole thing. I'm painting pictures in the canvas in my head as you are talking. So, MusicDish China's core businesses, artist development and show production. Then.
Yeah, I would say, yeah. I mean, we do a lot of promotion, social media, artist development. I mean, over the years, so this is something I would say beforehand. I would say every time when I talked about China, I would say when I first came to China, it felt like I was stuck between two movies. Pirates of the Caribbean on the one hand, and The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly on the other hand. It was like the wild, wild west, pirates and bandits everywhere in the music industry. The music industry at the time was maybe the size of the recorded industry of Hungary. Now, take into account this is a country of 1 billion people. Hungary has quite a small population. Piracy was uber rampant. Over half of it from the biggest search engine, Baidu, that actually had an MP3 search page. So you could find any MP3 file and download it. Now, of course, today it's totally different. China ranks 7th biggest recording industry, right behind South Korea. Wow. It has Tencent, actually, which is one of the biggest music players. It's really a video game company and owns WeChat, which is the super app in China. But is also one of the dominant players in the streaming music market. It also owns a piece of Universal, owns a small piece of Warner, has bought several different tech companies in the West. So China's a very different place. But when I first went there, it was, people thought I was crazy. What are you doing in China? It's all piracy. And to a large extent, that was true. And then they tell me, Chinese will never pay for music. Which really struck me as strange because, I came from the Napster days when no one was paying for music until iTunes.
You brought up an interesting phenomenon because my musician friends and I have chatted about this on several occasions now. And I wonder, I don't think this is political, but since we're talking about it, I wonder if it's an Asian thing. Viewers out there, those of you who are in Asia or who have lived in an Asian culture for an extensive time, what do you think? Do you think it's the culture that promotes the idea that music is a freebie? You shouldn't have to buy it? And I'm speaking from personal experience that whenever I release music, my friends and family, you would ask for it as a gift, rather than say, oh, we want to support you, we will buy your product. I can't think of many other industries out there, businesses out there, where people would assume that they can gain access to the product or the service for nothing, but they are willing to pay for it. Why is music in such an interesting little, nook of its own in that respect?
Well, one, I think... So when people would tell me this, it struck me as being racist. So they'd either couch it as, well, it was literally, it's not in the DNA of Chinese people to buy, and either they'd rationalize it, well, they're communists, be one rationalization, or it's just not in their DNA. And I'm a trained economist, right? And so I actually looked with fascination at the Napster phenomenon, because MP3.com actually was paying artists, and it was a freemium, but they were paying artists and etc. And the issue was very much the industry, and in the West was the industry's problem because the labels were not licensing their music. ASCAP BMI was totally different. Like you wanted to set up a online radio station, you could go apply for a license with ASCAP BMI. I think the base rate was $200 for a year if you didn't have a big audience. It was really easy, really simple to, you know, stream music online in a radio format.
Yeah.
But the labels, no, they were hard to deal with. And so it wasn't until iTunes made music easily accessible, high quality, easy to find, etc. Because Napster was not easy. It sucked. But it was all people had. And any black market usually is that. So that's the same thing in China. And, you know, as long as you give any people a product that, you know, where it's high quality, it's at a good price point, and etc., they will pay for it. And, you know, we see in China, of course, a growing amount of subscribers to online music. Here in Asia, it's a little different. The platforms tend to monetize fandom over consumption. So that, yeah, you know, do K-pop fans, are they willing to pay money? Oh, hell yeah, they are. They'll pay for a big billboard in the subway or wrap a plane saying happy birthday to their favorite. So yes, people are willing to pay. But they didn't, you know, people were thinking I'm crazy. Why China? And yeah, I was kind of crazy. But I imagine that there was a lot of potential for this market because I saw a lot of creativity on the supply side.
Yeah.
And so the question was, when would China come to the point that the government would value IP? And, you know, any government value, you know, America was one of the biggest IP thieves in its first 100 years. It was stealing from the British, it was stealing from everybody, right? And as soon as America started creating a lot of IP, they were like, oh, well, now we want to protect IP. And the same thing, hey, China is a very different place when it comes to IP protection than it was before.
I like that you made a good point about what some of us call relationship marketing, where you kind of create an association with your fan base, or your fan base believe in your work, and your fans are really, truly, at the end of the day, the ones who support your work as a musician. So that's a very good point. I have a couple of good points from our viewers as well. One is from Ben. Ben Ang is based in Singapore and a good friend of mine. Ben says, many years ago, I read a book by a Chinese law professor on intellectual property, where he wrote that personal property was a Western capitalist idea, and therefore so was intellectual property. Ben is in the legal area as well. I think his focus is on cyber law. Ben, and another quote from our good friend Mike Brand, who works with Cold Fusion, the programming language, who also worked on Todd Rundgren's Petronet. Mike says, my feeling of what you're asking is that the evolved music industry is a bloody mess. The depth of the depth of middle layers adds unneeded barriers and cost. So we got some interesting points from our viewers. Any other points or questions for Eric? Please put them in the live chat. So Eric, you kind of covered.
I would like to dispel a little Ben's what he said.
Okay.
Yeah, I know of no more capitalist country than China. Things, well, I mean, I'm not saying historically. I'm speaking of the last 40. You know, Deng Xiaoping famously said, "It is glorious to become rich," and that launched a new China, and it launched entrepreneurship in China. The private sector accounts for the over 80% of employment in China comes from the private sector, not the state-owned enterprises, right? Investment, revenue, stock market valuation comes mostly from the private sector. That is very, very, I mean, You can ask, we can see the graveyard of Western brands that have tried to come into this market, like Uber and etc. It is, capitalism or entrepreneurship is a human trait, I would say. And it doesn't matter what country you go to, we've been trading since we came out of the caves. And that's, when we say capitalism, we're really talking about, economic activity, right? The freewheeling economic activity between two people or groups of people. And it's just that the conditions must be there to allow it to happen in a way that the transaction cost of doing a transaction is low, right? So that's why we went from bartering to having money, because it made it easy to buy something versus saying, well, I don't really want your sheep. I really want a cow, and I don't have any cows, Oh, you got money? Oh, okay. I'll sell you this.
It would be interesting to see music and money in an equation. Although that would be difficult, right? Because music is fairly abstract. You can't say 3 minutes of music equals $5.
No.
We have another question. Sorry, we have a question from Sam, who's in Sydney, Australia, and Sam is in cyber security. So he says, do you think the crackdown on the entertainment industry in China recently will affect future opportunities?
Definitely. No doubt. No doubt. Because you're raising the transaction costs of doing things in the entertainment industry if you have a certain crackdown. And, and we don't know, like I always say, every action has unintended consequences. So we don't know what the ramifications. It's way too early at the moment. But definitely, I think it's gonna change the direction that entertainment is going to go in. China is definitely going in a different direction than, say, the rest of Asia, which, as I said, or when I say Asia, I say East, Southeast Asia, which is very much based on monetizing fandom. Fandom is one of the things that has really been cracked down on here in China recently. So, for example, and this is, endemic, fans buying multiple copies of an album to try to boost the ranking of the band or the artist that they support, right?
Yeah.
Well, in China now you can only buy one copy, which to me is a logical thing, but that's a Western mentality. You can only buy one copy of an album, right? So how's that going to affect streaming, through which you were buying the albums, How is it going to affect people's willingness to buy a subscription? What about, there's a whole entertainment industry based on fandom. How's it going to affect that? I mean, in my world of more indie music, our world is much more based on live music, not so much monetized. Well, I guess that's a monetization of fandom, but a different type of more traditional form monetization of fandom. But yes, it's going to have an impact, definitely. I don't know if we can say we know what the impact is going to be.
Yeah.
Because we don't have an example in the past that's kind of commensurate, what's happening today. But no doubt.
There you go, Sam. Speaking of fandom, where are the fans based? I've got a picture of the map of China. For those of you who may not be so familiar, I've only been to China once, and I went to the Yunnan province, which you can't quite see in this map, I think. I went. Yes, it's beautiful. I went there with. Oh yes, there it is. It's I don't know if you can see my mouse, but it's the southern west tip. You can see it's yellow on this map picture. Picture of the map. I went there with my mother. It was a breathtaking adventure. When you look at paintings and you imagine that a little bit of magic was added to the paintings, representative of a landscape. Well, when you go to Yunnan, you realize there's no magic needed in that painting because all the magic is in the landscape. If you know what I'm saying.
And the people. Yunnan is where the majority. So China says it has 50, I think the number is 56 ethnic minorities.
Oh,
So you
wow.
can think of Tibetans, Mongols, Manchu, you know. Uh, the overwhelming amount of them are in Yunnan, and that's because Yunnan, of course, straddles so many countries of Southeast Asia,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Are bordered with those countries. And so the music and the food is, represents the diversity of Yunnan from influences from Tibet, the mountains, to, the tropical by Myanmar and Thailand. And so that's reflected in the food, it's reflected in the music. Um, a lot of Westerners would go to Yunnan, Western musicians. They called it like well, Shangri-La is actually, the legendary Shangri-La, not the town that's actually called Shangri-La today, was supposed to be Yunnan. And it had a very hippie feel when I came here. And so a lot of kind of hippie musicians would go there to create and live a more natural life. So it's a famous, beautiful, wonderful
It
place.
is beautiful. I wonder how much has changed because we were there in the late 90s, so that's been a
Oh,
long, long time. I'd like to visit again one day soon. But again, I'll bring up the map again so you can see where Beijing is, and then Shanghai, which is further south, but on the coastal area. And if you draw an imaginary line from Shanghai down, you see Taiwan, and to its left, Hong Kong or Xianggang. And then, of course, Macau. For those of you who are not familiar with the map, there it is right in front of you. And you'll notice that Singapore is nowhere near China. This is just a joke for you, Eric, because whenever I meet new people in my travels, they assume that Singapore is in China. But
really?
Singapore unfortunately is nowhere near China and nowhere near Hong Kong or Taiwan either. So there
Well,
you go,
I
folk.
guess they make that mistake because I think 70% of Singaporeans are ethnically Chinese.
And dwindling. I believe the percentage is shrinking.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, no,
It's got to do with population growth or no growth, Eric. And I won't go there. So, speaking of population and popularity, what genres are most popular in China? When I say that, I mean, the take up. So, most artists are influenced, or most creative people are influenced by what exists already, and there's no doubt about that. Um, is there a an adaptation or adoption of various mainstream genres that are more significant than others? You did mention, in an indie scene, but what about the more mainstream genres?
oh, sure. Um, I mean, pop has, so China opens up more or less early 80s, right? And first thing to flood in was Hong Kong and Taiwan pop culture. It
Ah,
had a huge influence on mainland China,
uh-huh.
right? Um, and then after that, I think one would say what had the most influence was probably, for a period, was J-pop, J-rock,
Oh, okay.
and
Makes sense.
then, of course, in more modern times, let's say over the last decade, K-pop. So, of course,
Oh.
this is why so interesting that there's a ban on. I love in the regulation when they refer to it. Some people said, "Oh, effeminate men," but no, the literal translation is "sissy men," which I go like, "Really, really?"
Ah,
In regulation, you put "sissy men,"
sissy
and of
man.
course, that's the influence of more K-pop, right,
Yeah,
into
yeah.
the yeah.
So you're
So it
referring
shows.
to the that I forgot his name. It's an actor, isn't it? It was an expose of sorts on how there was more attention giving to the more effeminate type looking appearance for men. It was this about that particular Chinese actor? I forgot his name now. I'm sorry.
No, no. I mean, the government for the past, trying to think. I mean, past 3 years have been complaining that this is having a bad, they want manly men.
Okay. I must have
They have a
missed that.
certain conservative traditional idea. And of course, I think more so in Asia, and this is against actually the biggest growth in cosmetic makeup has been for men in China, right?
I see. No, I did not know that.
Yeah. And so this is a lot the influence. I mean, if you look at even Japan or Korea, this is a lot the influence of that and how it's influenced here. So, of course, you may be thinking of Chris Wu, who's an actor who kind of personifies this look. He's Chinese, but he's Chinese Canadian, actually. But he started with the K-pop group EXO, then came back to China, became a pop star, and probably the most visible face, being sported by every brand. He got arrested for sexual assault, and in China, unlike in the West, in China, you're supposed to have very high moral standard. Otherwise, you are canceled if you want. But this is not related to any one actor. This is just, I think the government felt that this was a bad trend that was happening and was maybe creating too much effeminacy among certain young men and want to nip it in the bud.
Have they successfully? Are they successfully going towards that goal, or will there be a lot of resistance, or is there resistance?
Oh, of course, there's resistance, and it's like a few years ago there was a ban on tattoos being portrayed in any TV, right? And that comes in the face of, you walk through Beijing, you're hard pressed to find anybody under 30 that doesn't have a tattoo, right? It's incredible. And because it's a way for people to, show their individuality. So I know there's the East Asian stereotype of everybody is conformist. Well, not in China. I mean, to me, they're super individualistic, and so it is kind of trying to counter that individuality that a lot of these rules come from. And I don't know, I think, 60 years ago, it's a fight that the government could win, fight, and et cetera. But we live in the, even with the Great Firewall, we live in a global internet community.
Yeah.
So it's a totally different game. And
Thanks, Eric, for humoring
us. A
us.
whole dissertation conversation just on that.
Yeah, no, I know. But we won't go further. I'm curious about another phenomenon that you have championed, and it's the YáoGŭnYuè brand that you have initiated to support or champion China's rock and roll or rock music scene. Tell us a bit about that, and I'm also curious why YáoGŭn, why not another genre? And then I have questions about the particular YaoGun genre as well. So tell us why YaoGun.
I mean, so YaoGun refers to rock and roll. It's a translation of rock and roll. But I've always interpreted it kind of my own way. And I say it's Chinese rock. And more to the point, I would say Chinese indie music. And YaoGun, if you were to ask anybody in the West, when and who launched rock and roll? Well, that would be an academic debate, and there'd be a lot of doctoral theses written for decades and decades. No one's ever going to have an answer, right? It's a subjective question. In China, it's not subjective. It's S3E10, 1986, specific concert. It was the Beijing Peace Festival. And it was the first time that rock-inspired music was played for a relatively national audience. And that is the launch of rock and roll. So S3E10 is actually the godfather of rock and roll in China. And what that unleashed was an underground indie scene that has grown and grown small, progressively, but up until now. And has, of course, been inspired by Western influences. And it's really interesting how that came to China, because talking about piracy. So in the 80s, right, CDs that weren't bought were returned, shipped back to the label. What do I do with all this surplus stuff? Oh, we can't dump it. Okay, well, we'll send it to China, right? Because China was actually the dumping ground for a lot of garbage. And they were supposed to recycle it or incinerate it or whatever. And some really smart people would send college students in, or would have contact with people at the customs to grab all of these CDs. And of course, they're called, I'm probably saying the tonal wrong, daiku. And they were the CDs with the, you punched a hole in the CD case.
Oh, okay.
Because it couldn't be sold, right? You're not supposed to sell. That was the indication, right?
Okay.
And so people would go get these, catalog them, and create stores. Now, I always say this is not piracy, because we gave the CDs to the Chinese, and then they decided to do what they wanted with it. And this was how so many, it started with cassettes, actually, funny enough, and then went to, and this is how so many rockers and rock fans first encountered Western contemporary rock music. And I remember on my second trip here, I met a metal band. I forget their name. They were from Xi'an, and they were there actually for a band competition. And so I asked them, I was talking to the drummer, and I asked him, so why did you start doing rock? He said, oh, one day a friend of mine passed me a DVD of a band called Metallica. And I saw the drummer, and when I saw what the drummer was doing, I couldn't believe that you could drum like that you could have that sound, and et cetera, especially the double bass. Couldn't believe it. And so he starts getting more Metallica and starts learning, and then comes with other friends, forms a band, And to me, that is the definition of rock and roll. Right? It's not to be famous. It's because you get inspired by something, and it expresses something, maybe your angst or who you are. And for me, YaoGun is like one of those things that is, when I said it's their underground culture in Beijing, I went to D22, I was just blown away seeing like all this underground, grungy, Nirvana has a big influence, by the way, grunge, rock and roll happening, and going wow, this is the last thing I expected from China. But then when you look at the history of rock, it tells you a lot of a subculture in China, which now is less subculture and slightly more mainstream, actually.
So I see, therefore, thanks for that explanation. I do sense that the spirit of rock exists in your roster of rock acts, because I took some time to listen to some of them, and some of them I considered more metal than just straight rock. But the spirit of rock exists in all of those acts, and they don't quite they're not contained just under the subset of rock music, but they do stretch the boundaries quite a lot, and I did enjoy them a lot. So, so
That's good.
the
Yeah.
metal ones were quite something, I must say.
And I think like I have a playlist on Spotify where we put our favorite songs that come out. We have one for 2020, one for 2021. So this is the newest stuff that came out, and the one for 2021, of course, is still building. We build it throughout the year, and so I've shared this with different people. Obviously, it's on Spotify, so I share it with people outside of China.
Yes.
And they're kind of like always surprised at, that these bands are not ascribing to very strict definitions of genre, but are really, it's a melting pot of influences, both Chinese and, of course, foreign. So, yeah, to me, it's really fascinating.
So you have a quick thing with the viewers. Viewers, if you have any questions, please continue to put them in the live chat. I noticed that when you stop chatting, it's because you're mesmerized by the guests. And yes, I have been mesmerized by what he's been sharing with us so far. It's quite something, isn't it? I've got so many questions in my head, and they can't wait to come out. But I have one. Oh, Gary has a question. To Eric. YouTube is loaded with video and audio of all kinds of music. Is there some kind of censorship of certain genres, etc., in China?
Wait, he was saying, does he mean censorship of YouTube, or does he mean censorship of music?
I think everything, because there is content in video and audio as well, in video and music as well. So he wants to know, is there censorship overall on all kind of media content? Am I right, Gary? Yeah, I think that's what he's trying to ask.
So, I mean, first, if anybody doesn't know, nearly every social media outside of China is blocked in China. So if you want to access YouTube, you need to use a VPN or Facebook or Instagram or Twitter and etc. First thing. Second thing, there's not like wholesale censorship of specific genres. That was something back in the Maoist days where there was like whole censorship of, and you could do it in those days. Now, there's not a censorship on genre. There is a censorship on the content, the lyrics, for example. It could be on certain aspects of performance that would be censored, but not on genre. Though there was the interesting episode with hip hop, because hip hop, up until 4 or 5 years ago, was super niche underground. And then there was a show on iQIYI. iQIYI is like Netflix in China. Oh. We have a few Netflixes in China, not just one. And they developed a show called Rap of China. And this brought rap to a mainstream audience because, again, iQIYI is kind of like a Netflix, so it's not just niche people looking at it, right? And overnight, I have never seen a genre go from obscurity to mainstream, to the point that almost every brand was incorporating hip-hop elements into their advertising. And that led to a backlash by the government, right?
Yeah.
And so, so people say hip hop was banned. No, it wasn't banned. It was literally, kind of banned from broadcast TV. So more those type of things, right? And basically what the government wanted was a hip hop that was more conducive to, if I were to use government words, socialist values and etc. So more tamed down kind of hip hop. So there was that episode with hip hop because it just went from went from 1 to 10, right?
Yeah.
And it was really interesting. And hip hop is still very, very one of the main genres of music in China since that show.
Yeah.
And these type of shows actually have are one of the ways that more obscure music genres enter the more mainstream, including YaoGun with Summer of Bands. Before that, it was folk. So imagine
Ah.
folk music was huge before
Wow.
rap. It was folk, and yeah. And I'm just
Wow.
like wondering what the next one's going to be.
I think you should write a book on the history of music in China in the last 3 decades. That would be an interesting read. So there you go, Gary. It's not the genre, but the content. Makes sense, really, doesn't it? So there are a couple. There's another question from Ben, but I want to precede that with mine because it's related. So you, Eric, you have brought Chinese acts over to the U.S. and other parts of the world. How have they been received? And when it comes to booking the bands, what kind of stereotyping surround them locally, or let's say overseas? Because you kind of did uncover the attitude people have with the music scene. But I'm curious as to how Chinese bands or acts have been received outside the country, because stereotypes abound, preconceptions abound. I'm just wanting to know, have they been welcomed? Do people have certain uh, misunderstandings as to what the people are like, what the music is like, or how to treat them, that kind of thing?
So yeah, so I actually took a lot of years in trying to select what bands I wanted to bring overseas.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to bring just a rock band, meaning
Mm-hmm.
four Chinese guys playing rock. I
Mm.
really wanted to bring YaoGun, which I call Chinese rock.
Got it.
So rock and roll with Chinese elements.
Mm-hmm.
And so Secondhand Rose is a band that I brought abroad. They're one of the biggest rock bands in China, and they incorporate a lot of Dongbei culture. So Dongbei is the four provinces in the northeast that wrap around North Korea and border on Russia, right?
Oh, Dongbei.
Um,
Okay.
Dongbei, yeah. So think northeast, that part north of Beijing, east is
Okay.
called Dongbei and incorporates four provinces.
Right.
And they have a particular, well, like every part of China, they have a particular culture, right?
Mm-hmm.
In the way that they speak.
Mm-hmm.
So they're not dialect, but their accent and tones.
Mm-hmm.
But also, a lot of their look is considered gaudy, a mix of hongpeilu, so red and green with flowers.
Mm.
This band also incorporates a lot of Peking opera,
Ooh,
so gender bending.
nice.
So actually, the lead singer became a KOL because he started doing videos of how to put makeup for men
Yeah. Okay.
because he would go with makeup on stage, right?
Mm.
Um, and so for me, that was really representative because of course, it has elements that everybody can relate to because it's influenced by popular Western music.
Yeah.
Everything from Metallica to Michael Jackson would be mashed in there,
Mm.
but at the same time, such distinctive Chinese tones
Mm.
and influences. Down to one of the instruments is the sona, which I find the sona is the musical instrument that should be in every rock band. It is such a wonderful wailing instrument.
Mm-hmm.
It's a Chinese wind instrument,
Mm-hmm.
very old Chinese wind instrument. And the reaction, I mean, is all has been like, people are surprised,
Mm.
completely surprised because it's not what it challenges all their preconceptions.
Mm.
Uh, the music is high quality, so and it's very like danceable. And the interesting thing is when we bring it, of course, at least I would say 50 to 60% of the audience will be Chinese. We
Mm-hmm.
do very much reach out to the universities. Like, so if we're doing New York, we reach out and NYU, Columbia University, which have large Chinese international student populations,
Ah.
right?
Mm.
And so for the non-Chinese that are going, they kind of get whipped up into the whole chanting and, craziness of the show.
Mm-hmm.
And so the reception has been really great, both from the audience and from the media.
Wonderful.
So we have glowing review of the show in New York Magazine, for example, that compared the band like a mix of Tom Petty with New York Dolls and etc. And I was like, wow, I couldn't have written something that good for their bio.
That is wonderful. And I do have a couple of pictures that you shared with me, a couple of band pictures. So these are Eric's personal ones. Here's one of I don't know these people, so when it appears on your screen, if you can see it, it's the one with the blue lights.
Let me see. Oh, I think that is, yes. So that is Xiao Wang, and Xiao Wang call themselves a kawaii core band.
Oh.
So kawaii is the Japanese word for cute, right? So I always say the difference between the West and East Asia is that the West is about sex, it's sexiness, it's Kim Kardashian, and in East Asia it's about cuteness, right? And you'll see it in anime, you'll see it in, kind of K-pop challenges that a little because K-pop kind of merges the two.
Yeah.
But traditionally, kawaii is very, very important. So this band calls themselves Kawaii Core. Core being they're kind of more, if I were to describe them, like punk. But it's an all-female band.
Oh.
They're very feminist. They're very individualistic. I love this band. This was actually at my, we called it a Harlequin themed. We had 3 female bands, and the show was at School Bar, which is a venue that is relatively well known in Beijing. And that was my birthday, actually. So it was like a great birthday present I gave myself.
I'm sure. And we have another picture. It's with red lights. Oh, that could be the Kawaii Core band, because I see primarily females in the band.
The first one is Pizza Face.
Pizza.
Pizza Face. Again, kind of more of a post-punk band. Post-punk band. They've been like, ever since post-COVID, they've been like playing nonstop around Beijing and etc.
I was gonna ask.
They actually played our Get Unplugged show. So we do a series called Get Unplugged, where the bands that you love, Unplugged is not really something that's done in China. So it was kind of inspired by the Nirvana. Of course, Nirvana was on MTV Unplugged, and right before Kurt Cobain died, that's when they filmed it. I think they viewed it after he died. I'm not sure. But it was inspired by MTV Get Unplugged. MTV Unplugged. So we call it Get Unplugged. And is to have music listeners listen to bands, indie bands that they may know, but in a very different context and etc. So actually, when we did Pizza Face, I did not know this, but the lead singer, Spirit, on some of the songs, she's playing a clarinet. And I was like, you play the clarinet? It's like one of those things that you just would never imagine,
That's so cute. But does she love pizza? That's the important question.
I don't know. We've never had pizza together, we'll have a bar or...
I'm curious as to what you would put on, what toppings you would have on a pizza in China. Because I've never had pizza in China. They tend to make localized foods, right? Just like you would localize what you wear or what you eat or what you listen to. Local pizza?
Yeah, Pizza Hut has localized food. But I never go to Pizza Hut, so I never really see what they have. The places I go, which are more like independent restaurants, right? Not chain.
Got it.
They basically like really just trying to do a good pizza. So they'll have pepperoni, they'll have, not going, no pineapple.
What? I love pineapple.
Long on pizza. That's just, there should be a law Like if we're going to ban anything, it should be pineapple on pizza.
That's so funny. So we have a question from Ben in Singapore. It's a two-parter, so I'll read it to you. Eric, you shared some comments on LinkedIn about regulating fan cultures in China versus unhealthy fan cultures in the US. What has been the response in China so far? So that's part one.
To the regulating, I mean, it is such a new phenomenon, and it's quite difficult to see what the reaction is because of a lot of the reaction is also censored.
Yeah, gotcha.
Right, so they're not just going to censor. So what they did is shut down a lot of online fan clubs that, you know, so frankly did have, you know, I mean, part of it was trolling, lots of trolling by, fighting fan clubs. And there was a very unhealthy aspect to it. So, and we actually have a fan club. Now, our fan club is not on a specific band or artist. It is a fan club supporting YaoGun across the country. We have branches in Beijing, Shanghai. We just opened one in Guangdong, South China. But we don't have any of that toxic behavior. You know, basically we're celebrating different bands and etc. So it's going to be interesting to see how, I mean, there's a whole pop industry that is, whose economy, its business, is based on viral engagement, often negative engagement of fans, and the money that comes with this, right? So how is the pop industry going to adjust to this? It's going to be really interesting.
Very.
But like in China, you know, nothing is set in stone. Anything can change tomorrow. And so you always have to be nimble. You know, years ago, five years ago maybe, Korea was on China's THAAD list because of the THAAD missile defense system that the Americans were installing in South Korea that the Chinese felt violated their airspace, the radar, like a high sensitive radar. And so as punishment, like there were no K-dramas, couldn't be shown, movies from Korea, all the things that were popular from Korea were kind of unofficially banned, including music. And so there were many companies that were very much into importing, especially K-pop driven music, that found themselves all of a sudden with no business and had to completely adjust. And that's just the reality here.
I hear
What's
you.
the second part?
Part two is interesting too. When we can finally travel to China again, someday, what opportunities are there for independent musicians in the electronic music, not club DJ, but electronic music scene?
Not club DJ. Okay, because I thought it was going to talk about club DJ. So I would put the electronic music scene more under indie because they would play different venues than the club. I'll answer both because the club DJ scene is really interesting because the club DJ scene was very dependent on foreign DJs pre-COVID. Yes. So a lot of importing of foreign DJs for the club scene. And of course, what has happened with COVID is that they've adjusted and it's been a boon for domestic DJs. And I think, you know, that market will never, I mean, yes, of course, foreign DJs there'll be a demand for it, but it's going to be tapered off from what it was before, where they were maybe kind of sucking all the oxygen out of the room. Underground independent artists, really, you know, Beijing has 3, 4 underground clubs that will be, I know the owners very open and are looking forward to bringing electronic artists and underground DJs and etc. You see this in, you know, a variety of cities across China, Shanghai, of course, Shenzhen, oil, even Kunming with
Oh.
Vervo. So yeah, there's a market there. When will that happen? When will the government open the borders? I mean, I guess it depends on variants and et cetera. We're all looking at the Olympics to see what happens and what happens after the Olympics. Um, but I think generally one of the things that the Chinese businesses and government figured out is we don't really need stuff from the outside. And so I do see a more insular China than pre-COVID. That was really more reaching out pre-COVID, to the outside world. And now I see a far more insular China that's looking more inward. And China always goes through these, historically, goes through these. And Asian countries, Japan famously, before Meiji, banned foreigners. And then, what's his name, Perry, opened with the Black Ship and et cetera. So I think there's a more insular, and it's going to be interesting how that, a few years ago, the Chinese would have been all about bringing in Marvel MCU movies to help boost their box office and justify the massive investments in IMAX. Now they're finding out they don't need that. The biggest selling movies in the world are Chinese because, we have control of COVID, so people went to movie theaters. So yeah, I mean, even a non-controversial, because Shang-Chi, there's some controversy, but Black Widow, it was approved in China, but has not been booked a theatrical release date. So, I think that's indicative of some of what might happen post-COVID.
I think the lesson to be learned from Shang-Chi is be careful what you say, no matter how old or young you are, and be respectful, because it might come back and bite you on the backside.
Well, I think in fairness, he was talking about his own family experience.
But
at that time.
There's always scope to misinterpret, isn't it? Someone can latch onto a particular way you're saying or representing yourself, and away you go, or away they go with their version of what they think you are saying. But I don't want to get into politics.
No, it's not. It's not even a political thing. I think then it comes to a question: to what extent are people creating art for art, and to what extent they're creating it for bucks? Now, of course, Disney, we know what that answer is. They're doing it for money. But since we're talking about music and especially creators who are maybe new creators, to what extent are you doing this to become famous or to get rich, and to what extent are you doing it because you need to express something and be damned with what people think? And I don't know, that was what rock and roll was. It was basically a big middle finger to the world for a long time.
That's true.
So I think that's that's not a new political thing. That's an age-old thing, and we just come up with different answers at different times in history, right? So I know in the West there's cancel culture, and comedians, stand-up comedians have to deal with this, and what are you going to do, and what are you suffer the repercussions of your actions, and
that's true. So making a livelihood out of music is tough enough, but if you're a YaoGun practitioner in China, what kind of livelihood can you expect to cultivate? Can you survive? That's been that age-old question through the centuries, right? Oh no, as an artist, sorry, you won't be able to live. You can't survive on being a musician.
I mean, so over the last 11 years plus, of course we've survived, and I'd say to some extent had periods of thriving.
Good.
In the market. I think in China, what is most disconcerting is that you don't know what the rules will be tomorrow. And the difference with the West is it doesn't matter if you're Bill Gates or you're the guy owning a shop. You don't know what the rules. So just ask Jack Ma you know,
Yeah.
who figured out, oh, the rules change, and you know, I kind of violated them, and I didn't even know there was a rule,
Yeah. Yeah.
but you know,
Hmm.
so I think that's what, and there's a lot of changes happening now.
Hmm.
China's always changing. I mean,
Hmm.
it's always, especially in the last 40 years, I've never seen a country and a society change so rapidly. I mean, mix in the feminist movement, the individualistic, like it's almost like taking the second half of the 20th century or you know, since post World War II America,
Hmm.
and crunch that up in 20 years.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
without having social, you know, like people, I have a lot of admiration for Chinese people and how they face so many societal changes and just like surf the wave,
Yeah.
you know. Um, so yeah, that's the biggest challenge working in China as
Hmm.
opposed to working in Europe or America, or Singapore or Australia, where I think things are more. I mean, COVID is probably the biggest shock, you know, but it's an external shock, right? It's not something that's controlled. But beyond that, you know, kind of the rules are that are today are the same tomorrow. Technology is what's going to change things more,
Yeah.
not coming from government, right? You know.
Hmm.
Um,
I hear you. So, viewers, any last question or questions you have, please post them in the live chat. I have a couple. Eric's been really generous with sharing his personal and professional uh, issues, adventures, I would like to say. I like the word adventure because you never know what you get from the adventure, but it's always surprising and you always yield something positive out of it in that adventure.
I call it Alice in Wonderland. I always feel like I'm Alice, and you know there is that expression. You know, how far does the rabbit hole go? And
Yeah.
well, I can't see where I started.
So China is your home now. You think you will that's where you will retire if there's such a thing for you. And I
Right.
know
I mean,
you're
I'm a
newly married too. You've
music fan.
just you've taken a wife. Congratulations, I believe.
Yeah. Hmm. Yes.
So China is your home now.
Now, yeah. I mean, I've lived in 5 countries. This is the 5th country in my life.
Oh boy.
Uh, so I always say I don't know what tomorrow is going to be. But China has been my home for the last decade.
Wow.
And you know, I'm not making. I mean, I may like, you know, I may. I have talked with my wife about the idea of like, you know, living in Europe,
Ooh.
going back to Europe, maybe France or something like that, eventually. But it's not like anything on the near term plan, and who knows, right?
Yeah. Wonderful. Yeah. So where do you see the Chinese music market in the next five to, let's say, let's not go five, let's say in 2 years, because as you're saying, things
Oh,
change rapidly, constantly.
well, I mean, so it's really interesting because when I came to China was the ending of a boom in indie music, a boom
Oh,
in artists, new music, and etc. And
yeah.
I came on the tail end of that. And then for many years after that, it seemed to be kind of more of a desert. Like it was the same bands that established themselves from that boom. And yes, there were new bands and new sounds, but it was more like a trickle. Then maybe 4 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
yes, was the start of a new boom, which was really exciting. So we're in a boom period now
Mm-hmm.
of new bands popping up, new sounds, new styles, etc. So it's a really exciting time. And kind of coupled with that was, as I said, Aichi did a variety show called Summer of Bands. that put the focus on indie music, right? YaoGun and other kind of genres around YaoGun. And that kind of elevated indie music more into the mainstream. It had some bad consequences because every festival wanted to just like book the bands that were on the show, and then the fees started like skyrocketing and etc. But eventually it started trickling down, to the live houses and etc. So it's going to be interesting to see how long this boom lasts. And one of the great things that happened is that fortunately the government was really good in controlling COVID here, so that life was able to get back to normal. I mean, like tours kicked off, last summer. Festivals was really last fall. So basically we had a modicum of coming back to real life, which allowed the indie scene to really blow. It was like, the racehorses, and you shoot the gun and they just, it was literally like that. Everybody went on tour. Everybody would, like, there were shows and they were all selling out, and I thought ticket sales would take a dive, the price, to incentivize people to come out. Hell no. They went up. And people were snatching them and, selling out and etc. So it's great to see something that, started in '86 by one person that has grown to that extent, over time and really expressed a lot of the individual, serves the original purpose of rock, which is expressing the youth generation's angst and gives them a place to allow them to express themselves and let out energy and in a positive manner and etc. At the same time, the legal, legitimate streaming music market is growing and growing and growing. So those are all good indications of like the music industry has made so much progress over the last decade. And on the other hand, we're seeing that there's a new set of rules and regulations that we don't, for the moment, is not impacting, the band scene, the YaoGun, the indie music scene. It's more impacting the pop, the idol, and etc. But you'd have to be kind of crazy not to think that some of that might not filter through, or that, we may not be a target later. Who knows? So there's a lot of uncertainty that is really recent. A new element in the equation, a new factor in the equation that, I don't know, I'll tell you in 2 years how that impact, if it did have an impact. Or that did a lot of people, because the fandom was, deflated, did they turn to other styles of music? Could be. Maybe we will be the beneficiaries and etc. And as long as we can control COVID, the live music, the indie scene is very dependent on live, right? That's where the revenue and etc. So we've been fortunate there. So yeah.
Thanks. I'm gonna have to check in with you again in 2 years to see whether you're. Yeah. So my final question, and we've really totally and utterly enjoyed having you here, that's for sure. And for me, it's been great to see you again and chat with you. The final question is, I know we have several artists and bands from the US, Singapore and Australia tuning in. If they were interested in touring in China, they would have to find a booking agent, won't they? And that would be, could they? Is it as simple as that?
I would say the first thing is they have to realize that they're starting largely from scratch, because there is no YouTube, there is no Facebook, there's no Instagram, there's no Spotify, right? So basically, you're going to, what would be the point of touring somewhere where no one knows you? So like I spent many years touring, pre-COVID, touring international bands. And at the moment, I'm actually working with West Side Music Sweden, doing whole distributing and promotion of Swedish indie music in China.
Mm-hmm.
So the first thing is that you have to work with a promoter who's going to help establish a presence in China for your music, who knows whether your music is going to, what is the demand for that type of music? Where should you be touring? Should it just be Beijing, Shanghai? Should it be a broader tour, and etc. Who can test, because it's not fashionable anymore to do this, which was how the music industry was before, right? It's data driven. So to really test and see, how should you do a tour and etc. But the first is to create a foundation, right, on social media and etc.
So this would have to be a local presence then. So
yes,
yes, yes.
Completely, you have to have a local presence because sometimes you're going to see from your Spotify, your YouTube, and etc. that, oh, I'm getting a lot of fans in Japan. And then you're going to talk to a promoter in Japan and say, hey, here's the stats. Look, we got this fan base in Japan, and then they're going to work off that. Here, can't do that. Like I can tell you, artists tell me, oh, I think my music would be, really popular in China. I go well, let me see if your music is available in China, and I'll see on NetEase. And I go right, you've got 2 people that have liked your profile on NetEase. That's not the basis for, taking any conclusion whether people like your music.
So are the local streaming services in China, hence local, are they open to submissions outside China? Are other artists submitting a profile from outside China?
No. Of course. The problem is now that the distributors, CD Baby or Jung, do a pretty bad job putting their music with, Chinese bio, Chinese lyrics. These are all really important. Most of them don't even have an artist pick under their profile. So they kind of look like not an official artist profile. So doing the distribution right is like the first thing. And most of them don't do that. Most of them don't have music videos available for some reason, where that's kind of important. And then the second thing is, I always say, there's an old expression, if a tree falls but no one's there to hear it, does it make a noise? No, it doesn't. So just because your music is available on a streaming platform in China doesn't mean that people are going to find it. Actually, most likely, they won't, right? So then doing social, I always tell people, it's like if I had a band in China I want to bring to Australia or America or wherever, and they don't have a YouTube, they don't have an Instagram, they don't have a Facebook, they don't have a Twitter, they're not on Spotify. What do you think are the chances that a venue wants to book my band? What do you think are the chances that a festival wants to book my band? What type of conditions would I be able to get that booking? Well, it'd be pretty pitiful. So it's important to, if an artist really is serious, and I have a roster of artists, and they have actually invested in promotion and marketing in the market before they came here. Stul Dagsland, really experimental music. I don't even know how to describe it. I met them at South by Southwest. They wanted to come to China. I just fell in love with their music. We did a whole promotion campaign. We got them, in the middle of that promotion campaign, we got them booked to a festival. And then we organized a tour, of which, based on the marketing, the data I was looking at, we determined that one of the best things would be to do art spaces versus traditional music venues. So half the bookings were in art spaces, galleries, and things like that, which was a boom for us because it really appealed to that audience. And so we did, let me see, what was it? 9 shows in 7 cities in 10 days.
Wow. So if these artists from overseas were keen to tour China, how do they find their promoter who will then help them develop awareness so that they'll have tickets sold and an audience.
I mean, there's not many promoters focusing on Western music because it's harder. That's the first thing. And a lot of them, because of COVID being so long, have not really been working or signing a lot of artists because, like, we've signed since COVID, I think 3 new artists, 3 or 4 new artists, foreign artists, Canada, US, Sweden, France. And what makes it harder is that in the West, you go on Google, you'd Google, get email, contact by email. We don't use email in China.
Oh.
No one uses email.
How do you communicate?
WeChat.
Oh, there you go.
So WeChat is a super app. You do everything with WeChat. You spend literally the only other place that you probably may spend some time is on Douyin, which is the TikTok, right? The Chinese version of TikTok. So WeChat is how everything is done. And people may have an email because they may, but they don't go and check. It's like people who have a Facebook page but never check it, right? And you go, I have people say, I sent you a message on Messenger. Oh, I never check my Facebook. They really never check their emails.
There you go,
so there's
folks.
Way of doing business very, very different. And so, like,
I was
my
going
first
to
thing,
ask you, most when you're confined to a country and the lifestyle, not because you don't have to leave the country, you think the world runs a certain way. But when you travel, you realize that culture deeply affects the way business is carried out. How would you explain to someone who's never done business in China that a certain understanding you must bring to a meeting or a chat with a certain understanding of your Chinese compatriot? What would you say is the most important thing to realize? Besides that, they look different to you. Yeah, they might not if you're from Southeast Asia or.
Well, I'll say from a Western point of view, what's really important is humility, right? Don't think that you're all that, right? You probably aren't, especially with a country like China, because we're using different technology, different platforms. It's not just language and culture; it's literally other barriers than what you would find in other countries. So in Japan, at least, they're using kind of the same platforms. There's some domestic platforms, but the international platforms have a large market share, so you can use those. When I go to other countries, people are using Facebook or Line in Korea, in Japan, Taiwan. But I think humility and realizing that you're going to, so don't assume that people are necessarily going to, like, I hear so many artists telling me, oh, but I've got a feeling that China would really like my music. And I'll ask them, like, oh, really? So what Chinese bands do you sound like?
That's a good one.
Because, you're insinuating that you know what people listen to in China. So I'm like, oh, okay. So what Chinese bands do you sound like? And if you can't answer that, if you answer the question, I go like, oh, I'm impressed. Okay, now I want to have a bigger conversation. But educate yourself. Educate yourself a little about what the market is like and et cetera in China. Obviously, feel free to reach out to me. And, LinkedIn is the only social media that's available in China.
Oh, there you go, folks.
Yeah. I think the government decided, well, that's for business and that's good for our economy, so we're going to let them, that's Microsoft, we're going to let them stay and be active. So you can reach out to people on LinkedIn. Of course, it's an imperfect, a lot of people that might be in your music genre aren't using LinkedIn. I'm not saying everybody's using LinkedIn and et cetera, especially maybe not music people as opposed to tech people or AI people or things like that. But yeah.
There you go. So you guys, if you need to get in touch with Eric, he is on LinkedIn, or you can find his contact from MusicDish China.
I do check my email.
And
So
he does check
MusicDish.
his email.
Yes, I do. Yeah. Old habits are hard to break.
Your email, I believe, is musicdish underscore
No,
China.
no. MusicDish@gmail.com. Real
Oh,
simple.
just mute. Oh, let me just type it on your up here so everyone can see it in case they want to contact you. So I'll just put it under your self in the live stream. musicdish@gmail.com. Yes? Okay,
Yes,
so
yes. And I think so. I would say one thing that people could do is, and can I send you the link through the?
through Skype? Uh-huh.
So I'd mentioned that we do have, some Spotify playlist. And so I would say for people that are really interested in knowing the sound of Chinese indie music, and so that they can see how they may fit. Of course, these are what we feel are our favorites. To
Okay, I have put the link up on the live stream. You should see it in a few seconds, and I will expand it for those of you who need.
two links, and they can listen to that and get an idea of what is, most of these bands are bands that are touring across China. So they have to sell tickets, and it gives you an idea of what is, where is the indie music in the last 2 years. So these are not like songs from 5 years ago. These are all songs that were released in 2020 or 2021.
Got it. I'll put the link also in
Right.
the live chat, y'all, so that you can just click on it in case you are visually challenged. And but there it is, and you can see Eric's email though, musicdish@gmail.com. All right. So, all right, I don't have any more questions for you, Eric, and I know you're probably kind of a little weary from the chat now, and you want to go have a glass of beer or something. I don't know. I know Singaporeans love their
11
local beer.
o'clock in the morning?
Oh,
My
wow.
God, you have such an idea of me at 11 o'clock in the morning. Yeah, I need a beer, right? Maybe some Baijiu. I don't know.
Hey, yeah, I do have some friends who would drink beer at any time of the day, especially my Aussie friends. Hey, Aussie friends. But thanks.
That did surprise me when I was at an airport in Frankfurt, and I was there at 7 a.m. on a layover, waiting for another flight. I'm drinking my coffee at a little cafe, and this group of 4 German businessmen go up, and they're getting these big steins of beer at 7 a.m. And I'm like, oh wow,
Yeah,
yeah.
that beer is like their soda, the the beverage instead of coffee or tea is a beer.
So
Well, Eric, thank you so much for spending this time with us. I've totally and utterly enjoyed it. It's, as I said, so great to catch up with you again. I hope you had a fun time too. And
yeah, it was great.
yeah, I hope you have exciting projects ahead. And let's catch up again soon, maybe in a year's time or so, and see how the scene has changed, or if you have new stories to share with us, even. But
Oh,
yeah, a little applause from all of us to thank you. And one of our viewers did send you a virtual award. Remember when I was trying to award you with
so nice.
they did put a picture of I think it was like a champion kind of goblet a gold goblet. So your services have not been forgotten by us. So yes, to you as well. So thanks, Eric. Take care now. Stay safe, and I'll see you very soon. Stay in touch.
Sounds good. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Bye, everyone.
So there you go, folks. I think last time I caught up with Eric was maybe 5 years ago. I told him it was half a century ago. He said that wasn't that long. Half a century ago. Oh boy. But it's so good to see him and so good to know that he's doing well. And thanks you guys for being here and for your questions. I love them. Thanks Mike Brandt, Ben Ang, and Sam. Sam, I don't know if you're still there. Next week, yes. Next week, I'm not doing this in a fortnight, but in a week's time to accommodate the schedule of our guests. So it'll be in a week and a day's time. It'll be on a Sunday. We have a trio of experts on immersive audio, and they are Rory Kaplan, former executive producer of DTS Entertainment, and Grammy-winning engineers, Bob Clearmountain. You have met Bob before, as well as Elliot China, whom you've not met before. Elliot China is the recipient of the Surround Pioneer Award. He was one of the early adopters of the surround technology. So if you're in the USA, tune in on Sunday instead of a Saturday. Sunday, same time next weekend, so in a week's time. If you're in Singapore or Australia, it's Monday. Singapore will be 9:30 a.m. Monday. Australia, Sam, if you're still there, I believe it's Monday 11:30 a.m. And anyone else tuning from other parts of the world, I hope you will join us too. This should be interesting. I have a series of episodes on immersive environments, audio and visuals, I guess. Immersive environments. So I'll see you in a week's time. You've been wonderful viewers. I've got this little thing here. Thank you for your subscription. Don't forget to tap the bell icon so you'll be alerted to my activity on YouTube. And also, if you're interested in my music, it's on my Bandcamp store. So I want to say hi. Oh, I have missed scrolling down. Scroll. Oh. Oh, okay. There you go. Oh, thanks, Mike. Mike Brunt. So good to have you. Thanks, Ben. Thanks, Gary, and everyone else who's tuning in or has tuned in but too shy to say hi. Oh, that could be my next tagline. Too shy to say hi? Don't be backward and coming forward. Yes. All right, then. I'll see you in a week's time. A week and 1 day. So if you're in US, tune in Sunday. Singapore, Australia, tune in Monday. And bring your friends too. Okay then, folks. Take care till then. Bye.